All right. This is Ehsan. I create art to inspire global peace. I am having another episode of my podcast, Ambassador for Peace. Today, I am honored to have Judy. Judy here. Thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to look at you and look at all your beautiful artwork behind you on your webcast. And I'm excited. We'll both learn a lot, I'm sure.
Well, to be more accurate, it's Judy Kimmel. You are the board of director of Peace Alliances. I definitely want to start asking some questions. This podcast is the topic of peace, global peace, and I'm just honored to have you here. I would really, get your insights, what your point of view, what you think, how we can actually expand this topic of peace and global peace around ourselves. So before we get deep in there, Judy, would you mind kind of share a little bit about yourself, your background, what's your story, and what led you to be part of this amazing organization, Peace Alliance?
Well, I have a really long history with peace. And actually, but my really origins, and because you're from Iran, I believe, my father was in the Foreign Service. So during my young years, I lived overseas a lot, and I had a wonderful exposure to the world. But in doing so, I grew up very aware of the discrepancies in cultures, in living conditions, in wealth and poverty disparity. And that was kind of my first sense. At one point, we lived in Lima, Peru, and I went out to the slums with my mother. She was doing work for the YMCA, and I went to a trash heap, and there was, this is nice to say, but a fetus, a baby who'd been left. And I was about 14 then, so that had some impact on me. But then to move forward, so I was aware of a lot of diversity and issues. It wasn't just the United States, and you didn't live in a nice suburb, everybody in the world and all that. And then I fell in love, and I'm a child of the 60s. And I met my husband, and unfortunately we dated. I was in college and we dated, and he ended up being drafted. Wow. And we went to Vietnam. So I was one of those hippie girls out of Forrest Gump that was putting daisies and shotguns and confronting the National Guard and all that kind of stuff. So that was my first real taste. And then, of course, my husband came back, and long story made short, he suffered from some PTSD. I was really aware about that. And so kind of that was the start, and then ever since then, I've been involved to some degree or other with nonprofits, mostly that have worked to try to advocate for peace. The first organization I worked for was an organization called Beyond War, and they worked with an international organization called Physicians for Social Responsibility. And the big issue then, of course, was nuclear waste and nuclear war. Yeah. So I worked a long time on that. And then things evolved. I got involved in a couple other organizations. Then eventually heard about Congressman Dennis Kucinich and Congressman Barbara Lee were writing a bill to create a U.S. Department of Peace. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty smart idea to have a secretary, the president has a cabinet, and have someone on his cabinet beside the military and all the things that are Department of Education. How about a secretary of peace or nonviolence that would advocate for that at the presidential level? That's one of the things included in the bill. Anyway, from that, I got involved shortly thereafter with a bunch of people. We kind of organized, and Marianne Williamson got involved, and a couple of congressmen, Dennis Kucinich and Barbara Lee. And they said, we can't just, protest, which is what we were doing out in the streets. We need to go inside and do an inside job on peace and really legislate peace, create bills that would limit violence. And that was the Department of Peace building. The initial bill was really the intent. to and it's still in not been passed.
Right, right. I'm just
Yeah, but
blown
we're still
away.
working on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that
Yeah.
specific topic. So what I understand that Peace Alliances was formed with that intention of creating a bill in a cabinet, in a U.S. cabinet. I'm just scratching my head that we still don't have that. And
Yeah.
what taking so long? And I think it was back in early 2002 or three that you guys actually started with that whole concept. And it's 20 years past. And what's going on? What's a standout?
Well, one of the things, first of all, just for a little background, we've actually had, since our founding fathers, George Washington, all those people, there have been initiatives to create some kind of an office of peace in the federal government, around the president mostly, and it's kind of come and gone. So there's always been that desire or need, Mother's Day, the women after the Civil War, there was an effort. And so sporadically there have been efforts. And actually there was a very strong effort during, believe it or not, Ronald Reagan's tour in office as president. And there was a bill to create a U.S. cabinet level Department of Peace. But it went to committee, which in the legislative process, that's what happens. As we know, Capitol Hill is pretty complicated. It's not a simple thing. And nobody wanted to create a department in a federal government, no matter what country, is a huge undertaking. But the idea kind of grabbed some people. So out of that, the U.S. Institute of Peace was created. So the bill was all chopped up, but they did create, under Ronald Reagan, a U.S. Institute of Peace, which actually has a beautiful, beautiful building on the Mall in Washington, D.C., faced like a dove. In a way, it reminds me a lot of your art. And it exists there. But the purpose of the U.S. Institute of Peace, USIP, is to consult on international policy. It doesn't directly address any peace-related work within our country, like in schools or in state policy or community policy in terms of guns or violence or anything like that. So it's great. It was a little step, and it takes a lot of little steps to get someplace. So that's kind of probably the most legislative step we've taken in the last 20 years or 20 or 30 years. A lot of the ideas in this larger bill, the U.S. Department of Peace Building Bill, have been explored and implemented in some degrees, but not the whole thing, with creating a department. And it may not, as we say in the Peace Alliance, it's our visionary piece of legislation. We also work in a lot of other bills as well. So, for example, one of the things we've championed for years and years is the Violence Against Women Act, because we know that, if women are taken care of on this planet, we would have more peace, and we'd have more equanimity in lifestyle and in the decrease in poverty and child mortality and everything. So we do focus also on other things as well, and educate.
That's fantastic. Definitely. The female role, the women are the front runner on this topic. I mean, we look at the history. Unfortunately, it's all the males that has that been in one way and another involved with all the mass destruction and wars that we see it. And right now, I'm even looking at Iran. What's going on right now? The revolution, the standing up against brutality and violence and oppression is all these women that actually are the front runner doing that. Just incredible to see that. It's just heartfelt. But I'm still, what I'm hearing from you, there is a small, department of peace in the government, but it's not big enough. That's what I'm hearing, that there is a little bit of that, but as a cabinet, what I can still comprehend, I mean, any American citizen is going to hear this. It's just mind-blowing. This is such a common sense. We're spending so many of our dollars
Yeah.
to military,
Mhm.
to protecting the country and creating all this mass destruction. But
Yeah.
what is
Well, it is a dollars and cents thing. And if you, when we lobby in Washington and we go to like people who are conservative financially, some of whom can be Democratic, most of whom are Republican, they say, well, it's costs too much money. And we say, but it's a pittance compared to how much it would cost, you know, a little bit. This was a few years ago, and I don't know the exact, so don't quote me, but you know, I think 6 or 7 years ago, the construction of one aircraft carrier for the military, you know, would fund the Department of Education in the United States for at least 5 or 6 years, which means every teacher, in the entire country. But people say, well, that's apples and oranges. It doesn't equate. Well, it does equate, because it basically comes down to a matter of funding in order to implement programs that will either decrease our weaponry, increase our ability to educate within our school system, support the judicial system, help with, you know, the cradle to grave through the prison system, which is, you know, very embedded right now in this country, unfortunately. I mean, we incarcerate more people in this country than any other country in the world, which is shameful.
Yeah.
And it's slowly changing. Black Lives Matter made a bit of a difference, but then it was kind of taken too far, and many conservative people misunderstood that to be, we just want to eliminate the police. Well, that's not at all what people were saying. They were saying they want to train them differently and give them a broader education, but not that we don't need police. And none of us in the Peace Alliance believe that we don't need the military. It's just putting things in proportion, like you said.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there is reason there's a knife. You can cut fruit with it, or you can kill
Yeah.
something, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly.
everything has a purpose. But I'm very passionate about peace. I mean, just the fact of hearing that people are saying we cannot afford it, I really believe we cannot even afford it not having invested on this topic, because we are in such a bad position in the planet and the situation. We're in a push button game right now. So okay, so let's ask you, like, let's just get a little bit deep, just the topic of peace. What is as simple as the word peace means to you?
Well, I always think of the globe. I was, you know, alive when the first astronauts went up, and there was the moon shot, you know, the shot from the moon with the Earth, and that always. I'm in kind of a visual person, like I think you are very visual, and so I things have impact on me immediately, visually, and when someone asks me what's peace, I look down on our bright blue globe and I think that's peace, you know. I mean, that's what I want it to be. It looks so peaceful from the moon, but we know that there's all sorts of stress and strife and horrible things that happen on the planet. So for me, I always think about peace from the inside out.
Wonderful.
You know, I think you do too.
Yes.
And if you're not peaceful here, then you're not going to be peaceful with your family. They're not going to be peaceful in their community, and on it goes. So for me, peace is taking a breath. You know, one of the things that my husband, you mentioned our book, and one of the things that we cover in our book is the distinction between being and doing in life, and U.S. culture is extremely doing, and to the point that it's, I think, somewhat damaging to people and certainly to children. You know, a good way to get from being to doing is to take a breath, to get centered. And it's funny to say, but I myself have experienced realizing I'm holding my breath, or I'm not, I'm so engaged in the moment, or there's stress, or watching something on television, or bad news, or, floods or earthquakes, that we end up not breathing, not even being centered ourselves. So I think for me, really important to be centered personally to the best of our ability. Can't always happen. I'm not perfect. I do get angry. But I think peace is being centered with yourself. And then if you're centered with yourself, then you can relate more authentically with your family, your neighbors. And it is peace comes one person at a time.
Yeah, I love the part that said we are human being, not human doing. And
yes, right.
Let's talk about your book. You just released a book. It's called Self, and you authored it together with your husband, if I'm correct.
Right. Yeah, it's a story. My husband's interesting. He is one of those people that died and came back.
Wow.
He had a very serious accident when he was 26. We were just married 1 year. And he literally died a couple times on the way to the hospital, and then he went to the other side, and
afterlife. Wow.
Recants that now. But one of the things, because he was hospitalized for 6 months and couldn't move and was in the ICU, he came to realize the importance of language and words, and how he was able to create his reality, because he couldn't move his body, was to speak. Wow. And then he started to realize the power of words, and words, as we all know, can be weapons, or they can caress people with love and kindness. And so the book is really about that. He studied an area called ontology, which is kind of the origin of words and being, and the power of words as it relates to human communication. And how, if we choose words, like, for example, the difference between, but words land on us and have impact. And if you were to say, close your eyes and say the word search, it has one interpretation and physical somatic response in your body. But if you say discover, which is kind of the same intent, but it has a whole different impact on who you are.
Yes,
for me, more engaging.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing we point out to people, that often you can change your reality by changing your words. It's like, which side of the bed do you get up in the morning? And to some degree, what you pay attention is what you manifest.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you know that from growing up in Iran.
Oh yeah. I mean, I mean, when I came here, I came across some of those education, what you focus, energy flows, and what you think about, what you talk about, what you feel about, all of that. Totally, that's fantastic. And you attract. There's something going on with these laws out there. So that this is fantastic. So where can people get your book if they?
Oh, it's on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's called Self.
It's called Self, the vast world behind your words. The vast world behind your words.
Ooh, yeah. I love that. I love that. That sounds very
It is a different world. And one of the things, but this is like a simple thing. When something bad happens in your life, and instead of going immediately to the negative and, oh my God, and what I'm going to do, it's very Buddhist, but it works really well to say, oh, isn't that interesting? And not go on with the continuing judgments and assessments, and then take a breath.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting? And then see what shows up, rather than already filling in the blanks about how horrible it's going to be.
Making meaning about it. Absolutely.
I had an experience like that this morning. I was pulling out of a parking lot with my car, and all of a sudden my car just stopped. Oh. And I was kind of halfway out, pulling back to pull forward. And I thought, and I kept trying to shift it, and nothing was happening. And I thought, oh my God, did the transmission, this is a brand new car and the transmission's broken. What's happened? My head went immediately. And then I thought, okay, take a breath. Isn't that interesting? And I looked at the dashboard, and one of the, they have the little image of the car, and one of the back doors was ajar. So there was it never really happened to me before. I knew the trunk did that, but I didn't know that, if there was a little crack in the back right-hand door, which I couldn't see and didn't know, it just won't work. It won't go into gear. So I thought, okay, take a breath. And there, right in front of me, was this little diagram with this little red door. And I thought, oh, okay, turn the car off, walk around, close the door, come back in, and it drove away.
As simple as that, right?
Yeah, as simple as that. But I panicked. I panicked. And then I remembered, okay, take a breath.
Absolutely. There is this part of us that it really, really is tempted to react or make meaning or judge or whatever we want to call it. Now, my next questions. So speaking of peace, well, when we look at around the globe and when we look at the whole history as of right now, it looks like, there hasn't been peace as much as we really are worthy of, or what we are at a human in the modern time. None of that is happening right now. What is your thought, you view about why don't we have peace and what's going on?
Well, two things that come up to mind right away are two things: communication and also economic inequality. I think that if we had more compassion and communication and understanding for people that are different than we are in whatever way, I think that would be really helpful. I think we're trained by our societies, and certainly, unfortunately, now by the media, to be polarized and consequently alienated from a lot of people. So I think communication is very important. And then I also think that when we have such vast discrepancies, canyons between the really rich people in the world and the poverty-stricken people in Sudan, or you name it, and almost half the world is not well fed, and and many of them starving to death. That's not okay, but I think that like what you do and what we try to do with the Peace Alliance is educate people about differences, and perhaps the fact that, and I love art because of this, because art is, you don't need words. Art and music are fantastic. They convey whether
the international language.
It is. They are the international language. But that distinction, that ability to appreciate differences and not everybody be the same is critical, I think. And I think until we can get a handle on the vast discrepancy in wealth on the planet, it's a hard battle. It's a hard battle. Too many people making money off the military, for example, as an example.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love your answer. It was so pragmatic. It was in a way you didn't demonize humanity, because I usually hear that.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Yeah, I hear, the ego, there's this evil and all of that. But the way that you kind of put it together, I love that. It was very pragmatic. It was very compassionate. It's understanding, and something that we can actually move towards. Is not a more of a victimized situation. It's just like, okay, this is a problem. Okay, solution. And we just need to create a better communication barrier, let go of all those barrier, and then just help other people to feel happy and prosperous, and they can live their life without even worrying about all the financial needs. That's kind of what I heard from you, and it was very powerful. Thank you for sharing. So we are, as you and I, from the beginning, we were in this planet until now. There's always been war, and it looks like that history, as we know, 5,000. Who knows? Is it more or not? Or I was just watching this documentary. It was talking about like before Ice Age, there was a prehistorical. It was just incredible that what's going on. But as we know, there's always been war, and there was been mass destruction. And why are there so many? And what's your answer to that? Like.
Well, I think initially there was war, you go back to the cavemen and all that. Part of it was survival. That's not the case now. Although I think the model and the metaphor is still there, but I don't think that that's the case. And I think that that metaphor has been carried forward, and I love men, but I think the patriarchal model of society has reinforced that to some degree. So it used to be, if you were a caveman, maybe you did have to go out and be pretty violent, and people would attack you and all that kind of thing, and it was for your own survival. Now, and then religion came in, and religions are pretty myopic, some of them. I tend not to feel that way, but you know, I think most of the great wars that have happened on the planet, most of them, not all of them, but most of them were around religion. And
the name of religion, at least.
Yeah, Muslim, Christian, you know, Catholic, Jew, you name it. And if those religions would honor other religions and see the commonality, it's like the golden rule, which, you know, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, in the Christian sense, exists in all major religions in the world, but people don't relate that and see the overplay, which is with your art. I love the overplay, the two-sided art. I mean, we have to start to learn about the bleed-throughs. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, the other side of the coin.
Yeah, the other side of the coin, and that there actually exists the other side of the coin. You know, it's not just the other side of the coin, but that think that there is something on the other side. There is a different point of view. And diversity. I mean, the strength of diversity. I have a lot of friends who are not so much involved in it's all about peace, or it's all about the globe, or it's all about environment, but their work is more centered around environment. But their thrust is, of course, one of the big thrusts is diversity. You know, that we're stronger the more diverse we are, rather than the same we all are. Yeah. So I think that's true both for the environment and both for cultures and peace, and we're all the richer for all the differences rather than all the poor.
So what I'm hearing, okay, yes, this has been, it seems that this from, you know, in the beginning of history to now, we lived in a cavemanship. Maybe that was a necessity to protect yourself, and then religions came involved. And now in the name of religions, you know, although I have studied the religions, it seems they're all talking about they're all talking about love and unity and peace. But it appears those followers have to neglect it, of, you know, whatever that happens. Now, my other side of the question is there a way to have peace, global peace, and what is that way? How can we get there?
Well, we have to have the benefits outweigh what people consider the other benefits are. In other words, there's obviously benefits in global peace. I mean, we can name everything from nurturing each other, feeding each other, housing each other, making sure everybody is secure, and that there is space to have love and compassion. But on the other hand, yeah, I think it's a hard road to walk. And say again what the question.
So yes, what I'm wondering, like, from your view, how can we get to peace? How can we get to global peace? And what is you know, your personal visions and Peace Alliance? And so what is the mission and the vision we can get, you know, we see peace in the planet?
Yeah,
first time.
Well, there's two approaches. One is one person at a time.
Okay.
And you hear that often in a lot of movements and a lot of issues. But in truth, in so many ways, that's true. But it's how to create the opportunity and the space, the void, for people to have the ahas that will lead them to peace. So we have to, part of it, which is why I got very involved in the peace lines, because I had been going out protesting with signs and marching up. And that was great. And it drew awareness certainly to the Vietnam War, and eventually the Vietnam War ended. But my feeling after that was that we need to, that's great, we ended that war, but then we got into another war, and we just finished the Korean War. And, and it keeps going on. If we can legislate change, then there's a structure around which to formulate progress going forward in the area of nonviolence. So it's good for everybody to realize that there are too many people in this country who are in prison, particularly too many Black people who are imprisoned in this country. But unless we legislate change to do it, we don't have a real structure with which to move forward. I think to some degree, the transformation to a more global, peaceful country is mass communication. One thing about your sculpture is it's a form of mass communication. I think that if we could have more people involved in media and in the communication area, broad communication, not one-on-one necessarily, but broader communication, who had a more peaceful message, we move forward a lot better. Because right now, most of the media and even the writing, much of the writing, many of the games, the technology is based on violence and winning, beating, overcoming, overpowering.
Marvel movies, the biggest hits in Hollywood right now, right? Yeah.
And given that they want us all to be living our lives on adrenaline, it's not a sane way to live. But people now live so much on adrenaline, they don't even know they're living on adrenaline. They're living on fear and anxiety and stress. So yeah, things where we can create places or spaces for people to actually notice the difference, to go to meditate, to go out in nature where they're not being bombarded by messages and advertising and who knows what. It's like when COVID first happened, my husband and I noticed it. I know many people did, and it was on the news. Everything slowed down. There weren't any planes overhead. And all of a sudden, whether this is true or not, it seemed like there were a lot more birds out. There was, the flowers were more flowery. There, everything seemed to be.
The earth was breathing.
Yeah. So the earth actually, it felt almost like the earth had an opportunity to breathe or to take a moment, and consequently, everybody on the earth could do a little of that.
Self-reflection,
taking a little personal time to smell the roses, look at the beauty that surrounds us.
Wonderful. So what I'm hearing is one person at a time is just really inside job, and then we need to go from the governmental level, especially the United States, the most powerful country in the world. What better than that to be the role model and the front runner? They have been the front runners in military and mass destruction. It will be opportunity can switch and really, be the peacemakers of the world. And also I hear communication, promotion. That's kind of what I'm hearing from you. The more we actually communicate in different avenues through media and arts and so many other ways, people will start actually accepting and thinking this is a day-to-day life. This should be a part of our normal life. That's kind of what I'm hearing from you.
It makes me think we have, just like what you're working on doing with your artwork. We had every year we make a big deal out of Mother's Day, because it really started after the Civil War, and it was about ending war. But it's been now morphed into a Hallmark card, with hearts and candy and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things we do during Mother's Day is, we used to do, then COVID came and we couldn't do it anymore, but we still use the slogan, peace wants a piece of the pie. So in the federal government, there's the budget pie. And, as you were saying about the military budget, which is over half the pie, And
Wow.
then there's barely a line for any what you would consider peace related slice of the
Yes.
pie. So we used to, just to get people's attention, like your artwork is doing, we used to deliver pies to all the congressmen in
Wow.
Washington with this thing about peace wants a piece of the pie. So for a while, when we were doing it, we were known as the pie people. But now it's illegal to do that because of anthrax and all that. So that has gone away. But we always think about that in terms of, it was a really, really great way to get attention in Washington. And they remembered us because of this piece, what's the piece of the pie? And it just, there it was. And so we got to be known like that. So sometimes doing kind of out of the norm actions like the work you're doing. We did another thing with Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Ben and Jerry's ice cream?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So they partnered with us. And at that time, we were pushing a bill called the Youth Promise Act, which was all about helping kids get youth out of prison so that they didn't go to judicial, there were other options for them to do community service, et cetera, those kinds of things. And also it was a pretty large bill and pretty complicated. So in order to kind of educate, because part of the issue is educating people that there are solutions out there, really good solutions and answers. It's just that nobody knows about them. So we partnered with Ben and Jerry's, and we had these briefings in Washington in the House congressional buildings.
Oh, wonderful.
But in order to they had to go to the briefing first, and then after they went to the briefing, they got an ice cream cone.
Oh.
I mean, you won't believe this. We had over 1,000 congressmen and their staff come through the briefing because they were going to get an ice cream cone.
And the briefing was promoting
this bill that we were pushing, which was called the Youth Promise Act.
Now, this bill of having a peace department,
Yeah.
in the cabinet, how realistic or how far are we? Or is there any hope that they could be happen soon or later? Or what's the status on that?
Well, unfortunately, as you know, our government, the Hill, both our House and our Senate have been pretty frozen for a long time in terms of really dramatic legislation. And I would say that we hold, that's why I say it's kind of a visionary piece of legislation right now. It could be broken down, but as a whole, it's probably too encompassing, and there isn't enough commitment to want to create a department like that right now. That will probably come out of a terrible global disaster or something, unfortunately.
Or could it be a new Congress, new Congress people coming in? There are senates or new presidents.
Well, all that. I mean, we are not, just as a disclaimer, we are a nonpartisan organization, so we don't advocate as Republicans or Democrats. We're all kind of independents, is I guess what you could say. And there's a reason for, actually a legal as well as intentional reason for that. But so we advocate for policy rather than parties, political parties. But there hasn't been the will, with the members of the Senate and the House. There haven't been enough of them. We always get co-signers, and I think the most co-signers we've had in recent years from the House of Representatives was 76. So we had 76 representatives who were willing to support the bill. And we actually had a couple of Republicans and Democrats, mostly Democrats. But it's not enough to bring it to committee, which is where it needs to go next before it gets brought up for a vote.
Now,
that's not to say, though, that it's not important to advocate for it.
No, absolutely. I think that there gotta be a way. There's ways to really kind of publicize this. And if the public, more enough people, the American people, knew about this,
Right.
I sincerely feel that's a different story.
Mhm.
My questions to you, since you've been kind of a lot involved with this for the last almost couple of decades, what do you sincerely think that resistance is? Is it really because of the financial, or is that just a um, is that just, what do you think what's going
I,
on?
um, I think lack of, the first word that came up was ignorance, but that sounds very pedantic. And I don't like to put people down and say but I
Yes.
think there's lack of education, lack of awareness, lack of information about the choices that are already out there. We don't, it's kind of like the environmental movement, the same thing. People, if you talk to the environmental movement, they say, well, the solutions are there. Not all of them, but some really good solutions are there. It's just that people don't know about them, and consequently they don't support them. And I think that's true. You know, there's a big wave now. There has been actually for the last 3 or 4 years of a restorative initiative called restorative justice, and that's been used. That model is gaining a lot of awareness, but not enough yet to really change the judicial system. But when it does gain more awareness, there will be a way to change the judicial system. So a lot of the less violent crimes can resolve before anybody gets to even to court, you know. And there are cities, the River Phoenix Center in Gainesboro, Florida, is doing a brilliant job bringing that town together and implementing that, and it's brought crime down and kept youth, which is the big deal, keep youth out of prison, because once
Oh,
they get in prison, they, you know, unfortunately they learn all the bad stuff.
Judy, here's my last question.
Yeah.
Do you think that humanity will have global peace one day?
Yes.
Wonderful. And that's
That's
all.
my intent. That's my intention. It's been my intention all my life. I'm not sure I'll see it before I die, but I think, and I'm not sure how we're going to get there is the thing. Uh, I mean, I hate to think that we have to bring the world down to almost dying to then resurrect ourselves like Phoenix, you know, Phoenix rising
Mm.
to get there. It might take that. I don't know. It might be different in different parts of the world. I mean, I really worry a lot about Africa, for example. It's kind of like this forgotten continent, and it has such an influence on the globe, and yet, you know, it's on the other side of the world. So, you know, yeah, you know,
So
yeah.
you're hopeful, you're certain one day going to happen, but
Mhm.
we don't know yet when and how.
Yeah, we don't know yet when and how, but we just kind of, I think we have to keep experimenting. I mean, it's like your artwork. I think it's great because who knows what's going to be the trim tab? You know what I mean? The little thing that's going to say, "Oh, I get it." You know, we don't know what the trim tab will be,
Well,
but
here we go. We had Judy Kimmel, the board director, one of the board director of Peace Alliance, and an author of the Self. And I'm honored to have you here. Thank you for
thank
taking
you.
time and just kind of we get to know more about you. And I'm looking forward to continue have this dialogues with Peace Alliance and in the future with you. I'm really passionate to see a lot of the efforts that you guys doing eventually get somewhere, and because they're very important more than ever. Thank you so much, Judy.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
Yeah.